Hello, and welcome to this edition of Compassionate Conversations. My name is Lynn Flanagan, and I'm the CEO at Hospice of Rockingham County. Compassionate Conversations is one more way that Hospice of Rockingham County strives to be a supportive presence for life's journey. We want to use this platform to connect with and support the community that we serve. We're going to do that through education, hopefully challenging some of the misconceptions that may surround end-of-life care or serious illness care. We want to answer hard questions and not shy away from difficult conversations. And we'll do all of that with respect, compassion, and dignity. Joining me today is Flavel Collins. Flavel is the Director of Business Development and Marketing here at Hospice of Rockingham County. Thanks for being here, Flavel.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. So before we jump into today's topic, though, what would you like our listeners to know about you?
Well, I have had the privilege of being with Hospice of Rockingham County for almost 29 years. The main role that I play is in the growth and the marketing departments for the organization, and it is a privilege to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Before we talk about our topic today, I think it's important to recognize that one of the misconceptions that may be out in the community is that all hospices are the same. Some people that I have conversations with are actually surprised to learn that there are other hospices from outside of Rockingham County coming in here to serve patients or attempt to serve patients. So part of our messaging when we're speaking to groups and with our marketing, part of our message is that we are an independent, nonprofit hospice. But what difference does that make? What does that actually mean to be a nonprofit hospice?
Well, to me, first and foremost, it means that we are mission focused. Mm-hmm. We sort of answer, if you will, to the stakeholders in the community and not shareholders. And I think that makes a big difference in the care that we can provide.
Absolutely. I always think of, when I pictured in my mind, I picture one great big circle of care. It is our privilege to care for this community that we serve, and the community trusts us to do that. But then the community is so good to us. The citizens of Rockingham County never cease to amaze how they give back to our organization. And that's what we're here to talk about today, which is another way that the community can partner with Hospice of Rockingham County and give back to us. Of course, people give monetarily, so we would receive memorials, we receive donations. People show up out of the blue sometimes with just massive amounts of supplies, whether that be office supplies, medical supplies. It is quite humbling. April is National Volunteer Month, so let's talk about how important our volunteer base is for Hospice of Rockingham County.
There are so many ways that our volunteers give back to Hospice of Rockingham County, and we really couldn't do all that we do without their support. We use an interdisciplinary team approach in caring for our patients and families, and the volunteers are certainly a part of that team, but there are many other ways that volunteers can give back to the organization that help us in the patient care we provide, but is not directly related to patient care.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think people are surprised to learn that volunteering with hospice, that Medicare actually has that as a regulation, and they give us a percentage that we have to prove. So we have to track and prove that 5% of all patient care that we deliver is delivered by a volunteer. We've touched on the Medicare regulation about patient care volunteers, but there certainly are other opportunities here. Talk a little bit about administrative volunteers, or how volunteers may help us with our fundraisers.
Sure. There are so many ways that our administrative volunteers help. They come in and they work in medical records, and they take care of filing and scanning and keeping that work from backing up. If the receptionist has to be out, they'll sit in and answer the switchboard for us, so they are tremendous help. We have others that prefer to work with our fundraisers, and we'll tell you a little bit about the biggest one coming up a little later in the show. But they put heart and soul into the fundraisers, and through the years they have done everything from great big projects like the walk to, in the old days, stews and bake sales, and so they truly from day one have helped get us going and keep us going.
Absolutely. So, our fundraisers bring us right back to that nonprofit status of our hospice, because, one of the things that I know we are most proud of is that in 35 years we have never turned anyone away who is eligible for our services just because they don't have insurance or they have no way to pay for our services. So that is the reason our fundraisers are so very important. And when people give back through those fundraisers, memorials, donations. But let's think about the business end of the volunteering, if you will. So, we track numbers. We track the volunteer hours. We report that to Medicare. But that also translates into wonderful savings for our organization. And I think you've got some numbers to talk about.
I absolutely do. And I wanted to say first that 5% might not sound like much, but in looking at this quarter that just ended 31st of March, our clinical staff provided almost 18,000 hours of patient care. So 5% of that is almost 700 hours. So it really is a sizable amount of time. But there is a value placed on volunteer hours, and the current rate is $29.95 an hour is the value. And this past quarter, our volunteers donated so much of themselves, 556 hours to this organization. And that was a savings of a little over $16,600.
That is tremendous. And so you think about what that does for this organization and talking about paying it forward, right? So that is money that goes directly right back into our patient care and the support of our community. So we're right back to that gigantic circle of care. So when we talk about patient care volunteers, I don't want someone to think that has to be right at the bedside. I have been a nurse for a long, long time. So when I think about patient care, I do think of hands-on patient care right there at the bedside. But when we say patient care volunteers, I don't want anybody to be anxious about that or apprehensive, because there are so many ways that Medicare allows us to trace something back and count it as patient care. So we have things like couriers for our meals in Gibson House. Talk a little bit about that, about our tuck-in calls and how that relates to patient care.
Sure. Well, we have several couriers that every day they make the round trip from here to Eden and back to pick up lunch and dinner for the residents in Gibson House, and that's 7 days a week. So we're very grateful to them. We have a couple of volunteers that come in towards the end of the week. We do tuck-in calls to our patients and families, and when our census is sitting around 120, that's a lot of calls for two volunteers to make each week. So they're on the phone checking on the patient, seeing if there's anything that they need get them all tucked in before the weekend comes. So that is patient care, even though it's at the other end of the telephone.
Right. So they are, again, part of that whole interdisciplinary team, even though they're not going into the patient's home, but they're calling and asking if they need any supplies. Do they have everything they need, like you said, before the weekend rolls around? Any medication refills that the caregiver knows of. Then that volunteer can turn around and let the nursing staff know, so we can take care of things on Friday before the weekend gets here. So, but it's nice to know that things like that are considered patient care and can certainly be counted towards our 5%. So that is nice. How much is involved in becoming a volunteer?
Well, it really is a relatively painless process. We now have our training online, so there are 6 modules that those that are in the training program can do at their own pace. So, life sometimes gets in the way of the best plan. So if you've done a couple of the modules and something happens and you have to be out of town, you hadn't missed anything. You just pick back up when you get back. There's some interview process to find out where interests lie. And just like with any paid staff, we do background checks, we do drug screens, and things like that. So it might take a little bit of time, but it really isn't complicated. And again, now that you can do it self-paced, you don't have to wait for the next volunteer training class.
Right.
That can start as soon as you let us know you're interested.
Nice. And of course, the background checks, the drug screens, all of that relates back to what Medicare requires of our organization before somebody can volunteer. It struck me a while ago when we were talking about patient care, but not being at the bedside. And I failed to mention that you certainly can be at the bedside. So we have had so many volunteers in the past just bring joy to patients. We have patients that are in a skilled nursing center, let's say. I know we've had patients at the bedside that love to sing old hymns, reading to patients, reading scripture, poetry, whatever it is that patient would enjoy. Certainly have had volunteers there painting fingernails and fixing hair.
Right.
It's so important, but that is patient care that just improves that patient's quality of life.
Exactly.
There's also some folks that have volunteered that just provide some respite in the home. If you want to tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, if you think about it, caregiving is a full-time job.
Absolutely.
And in my mind, it's the hardest job anyone will ever have. And knowing that a volunteer is going to be there for, let's say a couple of hours, and the caregiver gets a chance to maybe get out and run to the grocery store or go out and get their hair done, do a little self-care for themselves. And again, the volunteers there, it could be that they're reading to the patient. It could be that the patient loves Westerns, and so they just sit back and watch a Western for a couple of hours. But again, it's given that caregiver a little time away.
Right. So that is something, too, that we always say that, Hospice of Rockingham County doesn't just work with the patient. We work with that entire family as a group. So being able to support that caregiver in that way is just tremendous. So couldn't do it without our volunteers, for sure. So let's highlight some of our volunteers. So this first picture that you're going to see is quite a duo. This is a picture of Polly Capel and Shirley Hankins pictured together. They may be the volunteers that have been with us the longest. I think both of these ladies have volunteered more than 30 years. So I want to share with you some things that Polly Capel has said about her volunteering here at Hospice of Rockingham County. Polly has been volunteering with HRC since 1990. According to Polly, volunteering for Hospice of Rockingham County feels like a literal badge of honor. I love putting on my hospice volunteer badge, she says. Polly credits God for giving her the gift of service. She says there is so much to be done for people who don't have. If each of us do just a little bit, we can accomplish a lot. Although she has volunteered in several different capacities at HRC in the past, Polly now serves by assisting with follow-up bereavement calls to caregivers after the patient has passed away. People always tell me how thankful they are for hospice's care, Polly says, but I always thank them in return for trusting us and allowing us to care for their loved one.
The other lady in this picture with Polly is Shirley Hankins. And like Polly, she has more than 30 years experience with us as well. In Shirley's words, she has gotten so much satisfaction from her service to HRC in the last 3 decades. She said, I love to help people. It makes me feel so good, and I see how appreciative people are of the help. They need it so much. Shirley said one of her favorite parts of volunteering is when the volunteers get together to help stuff envelopes, usually for a big mailing or a big fundraiser. She said, we have so much fun together cutting up that someone usually has to come shut the door. She laughed. Shirley agrees with other volunteers who say they've met great people through their volunteer service and have learned a lot. Shirley said, it's a very good organization or I wouldn't be there. She says, encouraging others to explore volunteer opportunities in that you get more out of it than what you put into it.
So the next volunteer that we're highlighting today is Kenneth Bost. Kenneth Bost of Eden began volunteering with Hospice of Rockingham County in 2017. Like many volunteers, Kenneth wanted to give back to his community once he retired and he had more free time. Life comes full circle, Kenneth says. You need people when you were born into this world, and you need people as you're leaving it too. Kenneth's favorite part of volunteering for HRC has been the people he has met along the way, whether they are fellow volunteers, staff, or patients and their families. I hope I have been able to make things a little easier for people to get through this difficult time, and I hope I have the opportunity to have that myself. Kenneth also finds purpose and belonging through his volunteer service with Hospice of Rockingham County, as well as a sense of pride in serving an organization that is so well respected in the community. He notes how easy HRC makes it to serve. The staff, the management, it's all seamless, he says. Everyone is so much of a team, and you just want to be part of that.
That's high praise.
Absolutely.
The next volunteer that you see is Leslie Mauney. And Leslie worked in the Rockingham County schools for a number of years, and like so many, when she retired, she was searching for a meaningful way to spend her time, and Hospice of Rockingham County came to mind. Leslie knew some people that had been under hospice's care in the past, and she said, you guys really took care of them and their families, and I was really impressed. Leslie has served in several capacities while volunteering with us, but currently helps us by assisting with office work. She's one of those administrative volunteers we were talking about. Although it's not direct patient care, she emphasizes that helping in any capacity helps the entire organization, and that it makes her happy to take some work off other people's shoulders. Leslie said, I just like helping others, and I like to give back like people have given to me. Encouraging others to explore volunteer opportunities at HRC, Leslie says, it's worth it. It makes you feel good to help others, to help the families. It warms your heart.
So one of the ways we mentioned that volunteers can help, and it's still considered patient care, is with our tuck-in calls. So now you see Cornelia Dalton, and she helps with those tuck-in calls every week. Cornelia saw firsthand the work Hospice does when HRC cared for her mother years ago. Her work as a volunteer is a way to give back to an organization that was, according to Cornelia, so good to my family when we went through this with my mom. While she has served in several volunteer capacities through the years, currently Cornelia helps Hospice of Rockingham County make tuck-in calls to patients and families. With our census sitting around 120 patients, it takes 2 volunteers several hours to complete these calls. But the tall stack of call sheets doesn't bother Cornelia at all. With a smile, she says, I enjoy doing tuck-in calls and talking with the families. Sometimes I get to talk with the patients themselves. If they answer the phone, I know they're having a good day.
Janet Davidson, who you see now on screen, has been with the Hospice Doves family since 2015. And like a lot of folks who become volunteers, she'd had a close family experience with hospice and wanted to give back to us when she retired. She had been a direct patient care volunteer, but when COVID-19 hit and so many restrictions were in place and volunteers weren't going into the home, she still wanted to help. So she started volunteering as a courier, and then she stepped in when our seamstresses, if you will, had all stepped away. We offer memory pillows to the families of our patients, and the families will bring in an article of the patient's clothing that is then made into a pillow. So Jeanette helps us with that. She saw the need when others had to step away, and Jeanette said, I can sew a little bit, but the pillows bring people comfort, and I'm so happy to do it. She says that you have to have a heart for hospice volunteering, and it's obvious that she does.
So the last volunteer that we're going to highlight today during this episode of Compassionate Conversations is June Strader. June Strader began her service to HRC 6 years ago after she retired. She was inspired to serve in the hospice care field due to her father having received services from Hospice of Rockingham County. And then 9 years ago, June's brother was in the VA hospital in Durham and in need of hospice care. Due to HRC's excellent reputation and the quality of care provided to her father years earlier, June was determined to bring her brother back home to Rockingham County to receive care from Hospice of Rockingham County. She was moved by how hard HRC's staff worked to help get her brother back home, and the experience stayed with her. Once she had the time to start volunteering, HRC was the first place she thought of. June reflects on the positive experiences she has had with sitting with every patient. She has been able to see the importance of the caregiver getting a break, so they don't have to worry about the patient, even if only for an hour or two. To those considering volunteering with Hospice of Rockingham County, June is very encouraging. It's more than just sitting with patients. There are so many other facets of volunteer service to explore. June says to get past the false barriers and give it a try. It was mighty nice to be able to highlight just a few of our volunteers and really show the different ways that people can support our organization, which in turn is supporting our patients and families and just supporting our community at large.
Exactly.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about a fundraiser that is coming up, but the volunteers here really got this started 11 years ago, am I right?
Oh, I think it's 17.
Oh.
We lost a couple of years there due to
Apparently,
COVID.
well, yes, absolutely we did.
But absolutely, this is their baby, and it has been from the start. We'll have our 17th annual Life Walk on Saturday, April 29th. It will be at Wentworth Town Park. Registration opens about 9, I believe. The walk will kick off at 10:30. For all of the details, you can find those on our website, which is hospiceofrockinghamcounty.com. And if you have any questions, you can certainly call our office at 336-427-9022.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Compassionate Conversations. If you are interested in learning more about all of the volunteer opportunities here at Hospice of Rockingham County, if you really want to explore how to get that started, please visit our website, as Flavel mentioned, at hospiceofrockinghamcounty.com. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook page and follow us there. If you ever have a topic, any question that you would like to have us answer, or a topic that you would like to hear addressed on Compassionate Conversations, please send us an email at info@hofrc.org.